AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by thecollector.com. If you're into mind-blowing dives into ancient history, philosophy, killer art breakdowns, or even epic travel spots with a cultural twist, visit thecollector.com. Stories to teach, inform, and inspire. Today's conversation is about why history matters. Not as nostalgia, not as trivia, but as a guide to citizenship, character, and civic responsibility. We're joined by David McCullough Lawson and Michael Hill, the editors of History Matters, a powerful collection of essays, speeches, and reflections by the late David McCullough. For more than half a century, David McCullough helped millions of Americans see the past not as distant or dusty, but as human, urgent, and deeply relevant. He believed that understanding history was not optional for democracy, it was essential. In History Matters, that philosophy is laid bare, a defense of historical knowledge, a call to humility, and a reminder that the past is filled not with marble statues, but with real people who struggled, failed, learned, and persevered. Today, we'll talk about how this book came together, what it reveals about McCullough's lifelong mission, and why his message may be more urgent now than ever. A quick word from our sponsors.
AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.
Dorie and Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you for having us.
So History Matters argues implicitly and explicitly that history is essential to democracy. If David McCullough were standing here today, what do you think he would say is the greatest danger facing a society that no longer takes history seriously?
I think that he would, don't like to put words in his mouth, but I think that he would look at this more from what history does provide us. And so then what the greatest danger is then the opposite. So history teaches us how to behave. And if we're not behaving, that is a big danger. It reinforces what we believe in. And if we lose sight of what we believe in, that would be a huge danger. And if we don't have a common regard for what we believe in as a nation, that would be very dangerous. What he felt very strongly about history was that it teaches us a sense of appreciation. And we understand, if you have an appreciation for history, you have an appreciation for all that came before, all the effort, the creative energy, the money, the drive, the ingenuity, and the courage of people who came before us to provide what we have now. I think that he also would, in the danger category, that if we don't have a sense of history, we lose a sense of proportion. What is important and what is not? And I think he would be worried about that.
Michael, this one's for you. You approach this book both as an editor and as a historian. From a professional standpoint, what distinguishes David's philosophy of history from others that you may have encountered in your career, but also your own?
Well, I think that David could best be described as a popular historian. And I think he never considered himself an academic. He considered himself a writer. He studied English at Yale and so forth. And I think what distinguishes him is that in his writing, he writes it in such a wonderful, creative, narrative sense, anecdotally, with color and so forth, that he's able to make history so much more approachable and have a broader range than, let's say, academic works and such. And also the diversity of his interests, I think, were incredible. He was interested in not just history; he was interested in art. He was interested in music, and such. And it was wonderful in doing this book that we were able to explore some of that. For instance, the piece that he wrote about Thomas Eakins, which is one of my favorites. Um, shows his love of art. The piece of this speech to Providence College, where he took a whole different view of history as to how luck played in history. So I think his bottom line was that he was able to write with such beauty and make history approachable to so many people.
For you, Dorie, you knew David obviously as a public historian, but more importantly as your dad. While editing this book, did you encounter moments where the man you knew at home and the historian that Americans knew felt unmistakably the same or maybe surprisingly different?
Unmistakably the same. He was a person with no sides. What you saw in the public or people saw in the public is exactly how he was at home and over time. And I think maybe that was in doing this book. Mike and I went through an enormous amount of material that comprises his archives. And I don't know if it was a surprise to me or reassuring or just something I really hadn't focused on until we went through this enormous amount of material to see how much he was the same person even when he was 30 years old. That his interests then were diverse. His commitment to quality was evident then. His initiative and also his optimism about the country, about other people. You could see all of that when he was 30 years old. And you also could see, he said that he was a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. So he was not a Pollyanna. He would get mad about things, and he would call a spade, and he would look and see where there were villains. I mean, he really saw both sides, and you could see that in a young man. So, but overall, I was not surprised. His interests were as infectious at home at the dinner table as they are in his books.
Peter, just to add on a little bit, if I could, one thing that struck Dorie and I after the book came out was that several critics mentioned that they thought that this book was like sitting down at a table and having a conversation with David McCullough. And I think for us, we felt that that was wonderful because so much of what he talked about, what he believed in his heart, comes through in this book, but that Dorie, as his daughter, and me working for him, that we would hear that wonderfully a lot. But this book, for a reader, I think gives them somebody who never met David or spent time with him. It gave them an opportunity to have this wonderful, wonderful, glorious conversation with him.
I kept on going back. I took out a pencil. I mean, every time I read, it's like I write all over the books I read. This was such a difficult book because every time I found a quote that I felt inspired by, I would put a star by it and a note next to it. And then I'm like 20 pages in, and I've written all over this book. And I'm like, every 2 seconds there is a quote that I'm inspired by. It got to the point that I'm like, I'm just putting the pencil down. I'm just going to put a star next to it. I'm not going to take notes on it. It really was a truly inspiring book. And I can't even imagine working with him or sitting at a dinner table, and having a conversation. I mean, I try to have history conversations with my kids and they're like, oh, that's great, Dad. That's awesome. What's for dinner? Thanks, guys. Maybe one day they'll appreciate
Well,
history
I
a little
think
bit
that
more.
with this book, you can imagine what it would be like to have dinner with him. And it's not a big book. It's a little book. And the papers were enormous, as I said. So it's like a little jewel box of what we were finding. And Mike and I, there was no David McCullough book sitting around for us to dust off and say, oh, here's more of his work. So what we really were trying to do was to give people, but also give ourselves just more of him. And so that's what it is. So I think, Peter, you'll have a sense of sitting at dinner with him reading this, and you, the reader of the book, will get just more of him.
Absolutely. But editing this book, I would also think that it puts you in a unique position because you're not just scholars, but also like stewards of legacy in a sense. There's a lot of responsibility here that kind of shapes your editorial choices because you're introducing new generations that are perhaps encountering David for the first time in his philosophy of history. I assume that was kind of something that might have been weighing on your mind while you were choosing these pieces.
Well, I'm glad. Thank you for bringing that up because it was a big responsibility. And in fact, I didn't really want to do the book because of that responsibility at the beginning. And his publisher came to me and said, could you do this? I didn't. It said no. And then eventually we realized, what, we really should do this. And part of that is that responsibility because he has such a incredible body of work for anybody to pick up now. He was very involved right up until, into his late 80s with his work and what he was doing. And he didn't have a plan for this. He didn't have a plan that this is a book I would like to have published. So Mike and I felt tremendous responsibility to choose carefully. And I think also I remembered, in work that I've done of my own writing and books that I've done, where he would say, if you're ever getting bored while you're writing or something just doesn't feel right, you're off track. So do what feels right to you. And so he, in his words, with my writing, and Mike felt the same thing with his books, we'd had a lot of coaching from him on our own work. Yeah. And we'd worked with him for so many years that we decided we would take this responsibility and do the book.
Yeah. If a young listener, someone who's never read any of David McCullough's work, finishes History Matters, your book, and walks away changed in just maybe one small but meaningful way, what do you hope that change is?
I would offer, which he would say all the time to people, particularly students and so forth, is read history, read history, read history. And I think he felt that you could never read enough history, particularly about your own country. And I think that would be the biggest thing. And also, one thing that we enjoyed putting in the book was, as Dorie mentioned in her head notes, one of the head notes, that David was always making lists. And he had this list of books that influenced him as a child, but also books that he would recommend to aspiring writers and so forth. And I think that if somebody came away from this, one, thinking that they might want to be a writer, whether it be fiction or nonfiction, or a writer of history, that those would be helpful guideposts to get them going.
I agree with everything that Mike said, and I think I'll go with this question now at the kind of the current time where we are, what I really would hope that people would get. And several things. His belief that we can't expect politicians to solve our problems for us. The country belongs to the people, and we are a good people. And what kind of country do we want? It's up to us. We've been through hard things before. He loved the quote from Winston Churchill that we have not journeyed this far because we're made of sugar candy. And I think he believed very strongly in sort of the old verities and primary old-fashioned values. And I hope that people will take heart and think about those and think what does that mean to them personally. And it's courage, respect for one another, self-reliance, courtesy, devotion to truth, loathing of hypocrisy, and the power of simple goodness. And those were the people who he admired, and that you don't have to be perfect to have those values. People make mistakes. Those were the kind of characters in history he admired, and he was that way himself. He really cared about all of those things in his own conduct. And I hope people get a little bit of that from the book.
Throughout his work, he often warned against presentism or historical arrogance, in a sense, and using history as a weapon. If you can maybe share how he would or how he did propose to use history responsibly in public debate or anywhere else.
Well, I'd offer a couple of things, Peter, is that he did get involved in some issues. The one that I remember particularly, in which a current issue would dovetail with history, was the Disney fight. I don't know if you remember that in Northern Virginia, where Disney wanted to come in and build a theme park, creating false history and so forth. And David and another group and a whole group of historians fought against that. And their whole view was that why create false history? Why create fake history? That real history is right there. And if you create this fake history, you're going to demolish the old history. And so in all of the talks and discussions, interviews he would give during that, he would talk about how important that land was out there and how sacred it really was to history. So he was both teaching a lesson, but also using the lessons of history for a public sense. And the other, of course, and this was something that surprised me when we were going through the archives and so forth, is that when the Panama Canal Treaty was being debated, I believe in 79, or thereabouts, whatever, David, of course, had written Path Between the Seas. And so he became very involved as a advisor and so forth during the debates about the history of the Panama Canal. And President Carter, I believe, at one point said that David's book was essential to basically getting that treaty passed.
And both sides of that debate used his book, The Path Between the Seas, as their backup. I think on this question, and I'm not sure exactly how connected this is, but it's just making me think about this, that history happens in somebody else's present, and that the people in history did not have the advantage of hindsight and what this was all going to do. So that when we are looking at, in present times, looking at history, using history, it's very important to ask the question, what did they know and when did they know it? He was he was adamant about that, and not to judge history and judge people in history from our vantage point, that you've got to be in the time with them. They didn't know how it was going to come out. And sometimes that's allowing, some leniency, but sometimes that also gives us like, wow, how did they do that? Like that goes both ways too.
He had a gift, and I've read his books literally all through, starting in high school was my first one, and all through college and after. And he had a gift of turning events in a sense where you had that mystery that as you're reading, well, of course we know what's going to happen. It's history. But as you're reading, you're like, is he going to make it? And that's what I think it was a gift among many. But this idea of still holding the reader's interest and the almost mystic aspect of, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And that, I think that is a gift that we are dearly going to miss.
Yeah. Well, I remember a great line on that, Peter, that David used to say all the time, was keep your hero in trouble. And even though that we knew the end and all that stuff, he was able by that immediacy, that sense of immediacy and so forth, and keeping his hero or heroine in trouble, keep the reader in the moment.
And he really approached everything as a writer. And so when he was approaching books of history as you would a novel in like the narrative drive. He's not making anything up. It's all based on primary sources and his research, but how you present that was what he was extremely not only concerned about, but fascinated by. He loved it. And he had truly a real sense of awe of how people in the past operated. And he had an imaginative, and again, that's not making things up, it's being able to see something from a different perspective, an imaginative sense of empathy for people in the past. And I think that that empathy comes through in the feeling that you're describing, Peter. I remember exactly, I lived through the whole time of him writing Truman, which took 10 years for him to write. And I was reading the book, and I think I'd just gotten out of college. And I remember thinking exactly that, what's going to happen? I'm like, he's going to die. I mean, you know what's going to happen. But
Yeah,
when I got to the
amazing.
book, I had that. So how is this possibly going to turn out?
That's amazing. I feel like there should be courses, they have courses about Taylor Swift across American colleges. They need to be courses on David McCullough. And we should propose that somewhere. I just want to thank you so much thank you for coming onto the show, but thank you for putting this together and taking the time to go through this. And I think you guys gave the world a gift here. And I appreciate hard work in doing this. And thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you. And Peter, thank you for everything that you do in your diverse interests of promoting history and so forth. David would love what you're doing because you were important to his work, that, the historian's work and so forth. But just being out there and spreading the gospel of history is wonderful. He would have loved it. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And Mike, I was thinking as Peter was talking, and I bet you were too, oh, what if he loved to have met Peter? He would have loved
Yeah, he sure would.
He would have.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, guys. Thank you again.
Great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in once more and helping make this little humble show successful. If you have any comments or questions, you could shoot me an email at peter@historyshortspodcast.com. Or you could visit www.historyshortspodcast.com or look for History Shorts Podcast on Facebook, X, or Patreon. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow.